It was Christmas Eve, and the cold air outside mirrored the chill creeping into my chest. I sat alone in my dimly lit room, staring at the glowing screen of my phone as if it might somehow rewrite what I had just read. 6 words, just 6 dry, lifeless words, from my father: "Thanks for existing. Don't come." No explanation. No apology. Not even a pretense of warmth. Just those 6 words, delivered like a final stamp on an envelope that said, "You don't belong." I folded my legs under me, still holding the phone tightly in my hand. My mind raced back over the last year and a half, the countless shifts worked, the sleepless nights spent stressing about bills, the endless sacrifices made, all while living with my sister, Alina. She had lost her job months ago, or so she claimed, and since then, I'd been covering everything: rent, groceries, utilities. Every expense became mine to bear. At first, I told myself it was temporary. That's what family does, right? You step up when someone needs help. But temporary turned into routine, and routine turned into obligation. And now, here I was, sitting alone on Christmas Eve, being told by my own father that I wasn't welcome home. The irony stung worse than the rejection itself. For 18 months, I'd been the glue holding this fragile arrangement together. I paid the rent for our apartment, not because I wanted to play landlord, but because Alina couldn't or wouldn't. I stocked the fridge every week, making sure we never ran out of food. When her student loans came due, I covered them without hesitation. Hell, I even gave her my old laptop when hers broke. Yet none of it mattered. None of it earned me gratitude, respect, or even acknowledgement. Instead, I was treated like some sort of tenant squatting in my own life. Earlier that evening, before leaving for dinner at our parents' house, Alina stood in front of the mirror one last time, fluffing her curls and adjusting her coat. She paused at the door, almost casually tossing out a comment that would haunt me for hours afterward. "Oh, in case they ask," she said, avoiding eye contact, "I told them you're kind of squatting here. You know, since your name isn't on the lease. It's easier this way." My hands froze midair, soap suds dripping from the dishes I'd been washing. "You told them what?" She rolled her eyes, already halfway out the door. "Relax, Ethan. It's not a big deal. I just didn't want them thinking I'm letting you live here rent-free or something." "Yeah, well," I muttered under my breath, though she was already gone, "they don't need to know that." Her words echoed in my head long after she left. They weren't simply careless, they were calculated. Alina always knew how to twist reality just enough to make herself look better, more vulnerable, more deserving. To our parents, she was the creative soul, the dreamer, the one who needed protecting. Meanwhile, I was labeled as too serious, too controlling, too cold. But cold is what you become when love comes with conditions. By midnight, the anger simmered beneath my skin like a low-grade fever. I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my pride, ignored the mounting resentment, convinced myself that staying silent was the price of keeping peace. But tonight, silence felt suffocating. Tonight, I realized something important: I didn't have to keep playing their game. And so, as the clock struck 12, I made a decision. I got up, retrieved the toolbox from the hallway closet, and changed the locks. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. As I turned the final bolt into place, the weight on my shoulders lifted ever so slightly. For the first time in years, the apartment felt mine. But the real reckoning would come tomorrow morning. By morning, the apartment was eerily quiet. I stood in the kitchen, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, staring at the 2 neatly wrapped boxes sitting on the welcome mat outside my door. One was medium-sized, tied with a pristine red ribbon, almost festive if you ignored the gravity of its contents. The other was smaller, plain silver, but it trembled faintly, betraying the phone inside set to vibrate endlessly. I had spent half the night preparing them, arranging every detail meticulously. In the first box, I placed copies of everything: credit card statements under my name, screenshots of her texts mocking me behind my back, even printouts of receipts for purchases she'd made while pretending to be broke. But the second box was personal. It wasn't just about evidence, it was about making her feel what I'd felt, all the sleepless nights, the gnawing anxiety, the suffocating weight of betrayal. That vibrating phone would never stop buzzing, not until she opened the damn thing or threw it away. Either way, she'd have no peace. At exactly 8:17 a.m., I heard the jangle of keys outside the door. My breath caught for a moment, but I didn't move. Then came the click, the sound of metal meeting metal, followed by silence. And then another click. And another. Finally, the knocking began. Soft at first, hesitant. Then louder, more insistent. By the time pounding replaced knocking, I could hear her voice shouting through the wood. "What the hell is going on? Ethan! Open this door." Her tone shifted from confusion to anger, each word sharp enough to cut glass. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching the clock tick closer to 8:20. When the pounding escalated into full-blown hammering, I finally stepped forward and cracked the door open just wide enough to see her face. She froze mid-swing, fist raised, eyes wild with panic. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up the still-moving silver box like it was some kind of ticking bomb. I tilted my head slightly, feigning innocence. "A Christmas present." Her brow furrowed as the box vibrated again in her hands. "It's shaking." "It does that," I said casually, stepping aside. "Come in. Since you don't have keys anymore." She stormed past me, dropping the box onto the coffee table with a thud. Her fingers tore at the ribbon on the larger gift, yanking the lid off without ceremony. For a split second, she stared blankly at the stack of papers inside. Then recognition dawned, and her face went pale. "No," she whispered, flipping through the pages. "Where did you get these?" "From your shopping sprees," I replied coolly. "Sephora, Zara, Apple. Oh, and let's not forget the spa resort. All charged under my name, Alina." Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You can't prove any of this." Before I could respond, the silver box buzzed violently, drawing both our attention. She hesitated before reaching for it, her hand trembling. Slowly, she lifted the lid, and froze. Inside, nestled among crumpled tissue paper, was my old phone, vibrating incessantly like an angry insect trapped in amber. "What the actual fuck?" she hissed, dropping it as though it burned. "That's what I've been living with," I said softly. "Every day. Every hour. Because of you." She turned to me, eyes blazing. "This is insane. You're insane. Dad was right, you're completely out of control." As if on cue, my phone buzzed loudly from the kitchen counter. Caller ID flashed, Dad. Without hesitation, I answered it on speaker. "Son, what is going on?" His voice crackled through the line, tense and accusatory. "Your sister just showed us what you left her. That was cruel." I smirked bitterly. "Cruel? You mean the family that told me not to come to Christmas? That wasn't about me, Dad. That was about protecting Alina. She's struggling, Ethan," he snapped. "Why are you doing this to her?" "Doing what?" I shot back. "Holding her accountable? Or maybe exposing the fact that someone's been using my identity to rack up $6,438 in debt." Silence stretched across the line. Then, weakly, "Is that true?" Alina lunged for the phone. "He's lying, Dad. He's trying to manipulate you." But I was already walking to the shelf, pulling out a small black speaker. "Why don't we play something for him?" I pressed play, and her voice filled the room, clear as day. "He deserves it. He's like a bank with no overdraft fees. Why wouldn't I take advantage?" Her face drained of color. "That's out of context." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "What's the context of 'he deserves to suffer'?" Before anyone could speak, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find Mom standing there, looking frazzled, and behind her, Mike, Alina's ex-boyfriend. "What are you?" Alina started, but Mike cut her off. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice trembling, not with fear, but fury. "Both of you." The weeks following Alina's departure were a blur of sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and coffee-fueled determination. I knew what I had to do, but the weight of it pressed down on me like a storm cloud. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice for every dollar stolen, every lie told, every moment I'd been made to feel invisible. Sitting at my kitchen table with stacks of documents spread out before me, I began compiling evidence, credit card statements, utility bills in my name that my parents had added without consent, screenshots of Alina's text messages mocking me behind my back, and even recordings where she bragged about how easy I was to manipulate. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man named Mr. Keller who wore expensive shoes and smiled like he already knew we'd win. When I handed him the flash drive containing years' worth of documentation, his eyebrows shot up. "You've got receipts for everything?" he asked, scrolling through the files. "Every single transaction," I confirmed, leaning back in my chair. "And then some." He whistled low under his breath. "This isn't just identity theft. This is long-term financial exploitation. We're going to make this very public." Public was exactly what I wanted. 3 weeks later, 3 certified letters landed on my parents' doorstep, one for Alina, one for Mom, and one for Dad, all from the law office of Keller and Moore. Within 20 minutes, my phone rang. Caller ID flashed Alina. "What are you doing?" she snapped the moment I answered. "Good morning to you too," I said dryly. "You're suing us after everything we've done for you?" "Done to me," I corrected. "Let's not twist it. You were co-signers on 2 utility accounts and added me to a 3rd without consent. That's fraud. It was just paperwork. It was theft." There was a pause, and then her voice dropped an octave. "We raised you. We let you stay here when you needed it. I paid for everything. I was never staying, I was supporting. There's a difference. But the real turning point came 3 days later when Grandma Rose called. I saw the lawsuit, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. My heart sank. You saw the bank statement? She sighed heavily. Your father cashed out over $9,000 from a savings bond, one created in your name. He used it to pay off Alina's old car loan. I froze, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. What? He thought you wouldn't notice. But I did. And now, she paused, taking a deep breath. I've frozen what's left and moved the account. It's yours again, where it should have been. Before I could respond, she added, also, I've rewritten my will. You'll be receiving my house when the time comes. I know you'll do what's right with it. Tears welled in my eyes. Nana, why? Because, she said simply, you're the only one who never asked for anything. And you're only one who kept receipts. The courtroom was tense, charged with emotions thick enough to cut with a knife. Alina came dressed in beige, as if auditioning for sympathy. Mom wore black, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Dad sat slumped in his seat, avoiding eye contact altogether. My lawyer laid it all out, page after page of statements, audio recordings, text messages, bank fraud allegations, power of attorney misuses, false accounts, savings bond violations. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. Is it true you listed your son's name on financial documents without consent? She asked my mother. Mom hesitated, fidgeting with her hands. Well, I mean, it was family, ma'am, yes or no? Silence stretched across the room. Finally, she whispered, yes. The ruling came quickly. The judge ordered $13,000 in restitution, cleared all fraudulent debts, covered court costs, and issued a formal warning on their records. As the gavel struck, I felt something inside me release, a knot I hadn't realized was still tied loosened for the first time in years. Afterward, I stood outside the courthouse, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Mike, who had stuck by my side throughout the process, clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, man. You actually did it. But victory didn't taste as sweet as I thought it would. Relief mingled with sadness, satisfaction clashed with regret. I knew this marked the end of something irrevocable, an official severance of ties with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Yet, as I walked away from the courthouse, I couldn't deny the sense of freedom blooming in my chest. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the walls that once felt suffocating but now seemed to breathe with possibility. For the first time, I understood that letting go wasn't cruel, it was necessary. The days following the lawsuit verdict felt like stepping into a new world, one where I wasn't tethered to anyone else's expectations. For the first time in years, my apartment truly felt like mine. No passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, no random charges showing up on my credit card, no guilt trips disguised as family love. Just silence. Not the suffocating kind I'd grown accustomed to, but the peaceful, liberating kind that came with knowing I finally belonged only to myself. I kept busy. Work became my anchor again, not because I needed extra shifts to cover someone else's expenses, but because it gave me purpose. I started small habits, making coffee every morning, reading books I'd been too tired to open before, even taking long walks through the park near my place. Each step felt lighter, freer. It was as if I'd been carrying a boulder for so long that I didn't realize how heavy it was until it was gone. Then, one afternoon in May, an email notification popped up on my phone. The subject line read, "Your sister isn't doing well." My stomach tightened as I opened it. Hi Ethan, I'm Tessa, one of Alina's friends. She's couch hopping right now, lost her job again. She says you ruined her life. Thought you'd want to know. For a moment, I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Part of me wanted to call her bluff, to demand why she thought I owed Alina anything after everything she'd done. But instead, I pressed delete without hesitation. Walking away hadn't been about revenge or punishment, it had been about survival. And surviving meant not letting them pull me back into their chaos. 2 weeks later, I ran into my dad at a gas station. At first, I didn't recognize him. He looked older, smaller, his shoulders slumped under the weight of something unspoken. When our eyes met across the pump, there was a flicker of recognition, and then shame. He approached slowly, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. You look good, he said, his voice rough, almost hesitant. I nodded, keeping my distance. Thanks. He glanced down at the ground, shifting uncomfortably. Your mother's still angry, you know. She says you ruined Christmas. I raised an eyebrow. Funny. She started it with, don't come. I just listened. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Family fights, son. That's what families do. No, I corrected, my voice firm. Families fight for each other. You fought for Alina. You never fought for me. He flinched, the words hitting harder than I intended. There was a long pause, filled only by the hum of the gas pumps and the distant sound of traffic. Finally, he looked up, his eyes pleading. "What do you want me to say? That we were wrong? That we should have seen it sooner?" "I don't want anything from you," I replied, cutting him off. "Not anymore." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw the man he used to be, the father who once taught me how to ride a bike, who cheered at my high school graduation. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't, or wouldn't, see beyond his own failures. I got into my car and drove away, leaving him standing there. As I merged onto the highway, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. A few days later, a package arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple envelope, and within it, a single photograph. It was me and Ellie, Alina's daughter, from years ago. She must have been 4, sitting on my shoulders, laughing as she gripped my face with her tiny hands. On the back of the photo, written in shaky handwriting, were 3 words: "I'm sorry. Thank you, Ellie." I stared at the note until the words blurred, my chest tightening with emotions I couldn't quite name. Guilt? Relief? Gratitude? Maybe all of them. I didn't know how she'd gotten my address, maybe Grandma Rose, maybe fate, but that one note made everything worth it. That night, I placed the photo in my desk drawer, next to a stack of old receipts and a flash drive containing recordings I'd never listened to again. It wasn't a reminder of the past, it was proof that walking away didn't mean giving up on love. It meant choosing to love yourself enough to stop being destroyed by others' expectations. And for the first time in my life, I understood what freedom really meant. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting long, golden streaks across the wooden floor of my apartment. I sat by the window, a cup of coffee cooling in my hands, as I stared out at the quiet street below. It was one of those rare moments when the world seemed to pause, no horns blaring, no hurried footsteps on the pavement, just the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. For so long, I'd lived in chaos, drowning in expectations that weren't mine to meet. But now, here I was, finally breathing freely. My gaze drifted to the desk in the corner of the room, where Ellie's photograph lay tucked inside the drawer. It wasn't hidden, it wasn't meant to be forgotten, but it served as a reminder. Not of guilt or regret, but of clarity. Walking away hadn't been about severing ties for the sake of cruelty, it had been about reclaiming myself. Love wasn't blind sacrifice anymore. It was knowing your worth and refusing to let others diminish it. I thought about everything that had led me here, the sleepless nights spent worrying over bills, the endless arguments cloaked as family discussions, the crushing weight of being told I owed more than I could ever give. And then there was Alina, the sister who saw me not as family but as a resource. My parents, who never questioned her actions but always demanded more from me. I used to think their love came with strings attached because they needed me. Now, I understood, their system of love came with transactions, and I'd been paying the price for years. But no longer. Turning away from the window, I walked over to the desk and opened the drawer. There it was, the photo of Ellie, her tiny hands gripping my face, her laughter frozen in time. On the back, her words still lingered: "I'm sorry for how my mom treated you. Thank you for everything." Her apology didn't absolve anyone, nor did it erase the pain of what had happened. But it reminded me that forgiveness isn't always about others, it's about releasing yourself from the chains of resentment. Holding on to anger would have kept me tethered to them forever. Letting go meant I could move forward, unburdened. I closed the drawer gently and returned to the window. Outside, a young girl chased after a balloon that had slipped from her grasp. Her mother ran after her, laughing, while the father stood nearby, shaking his head with a smile. Watching them, I felt something unfamiliar stir within me, not jealousy, not longing, but gratitude. Gratitude for the life I'd built, for the lessons I'd learned, for the freedom I'd claimed. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't punishment. This was liberation. Walking away hadn't made me heartless, it had made me whole. For years, I'd convinced myself that staying silent, keeping peace, sacrificing endlessly, that this was what love looked like. But love shouldn't cost you your soul. Real love means setting boundaries. Real love means choosing yourself when no one else will. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the edges of my apartment, I realized something profound: stepping away doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care differently. You care enough to protect your own heart, to honor your own needs, to live authentically. And that's what I was doing now. Living authentically. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of silence. It wasn't heavy or suffocating, it was peaceful, empowering. In that silence, I found my voice. A voice that said, "I am enough." When I finally rose from the chair, stretching my arms overhead, I felt lighter somehow. Like the weight of decades' worth of obligation had dissolved into the sunlight streaming through the window. I poured the last sip of lukewarm coffee down the sink, rinsed the mug, and placed it upside down on the drying rack. Then, grabbing my jacket from the hook by the door, I stepped outside. The air smelled fresh, crisp, full of possibility. As I walked down the street, I didn't look back. Because for the first time in my life, I truly understood, walking away wasn't cruel, it was courageous.